Welcome, Eagles, to another episode of TradCatKnight Radio. I am Eric Ajewski, founder and owner of TradCatKnight, your one-stop website for all of the day's latest church apostasy news, end-time news. Now, TradCatKnight is featured all over the alternative media circuit, and I'm doing my best to keep you up to date on all of the latest happenings as we head closer to the fruition of the third secret of Fatima. My good friends, I ask you to please subscribe to TradCatKnight right now. Click that notification button so you can get all the latest videos sent directly to your email. And if I could also ask, please get behind this apostolate financially. We fly by the motto, we go and grow as your charity flows. So please click that PayPal button and get behind this apostolate. We have so many great special guests coming on to the show. And January's been very, very helpful in the sense that many of you are responding back to me and just thanking this apostle for all the wonderful guests we're having on. And for January 23rd today, 2018, we have a returning guest coming back onto the show. Going to be another blockbuster talk. I have with me today Dr. E. Michael Jones, and it's good to get Mr. Jones back on the show, and there's so much to discuss. I really don't know where to start, Mr. Jones. Perhaps we can start with Trump, the current state, if you will, of where America is, where we are headed. Maybe you would like to give your opinion on Trump's policies in the Middle East. I know I have been talking when I've been doing media appearances the last week concerning the whole issue of Jerusalem and how the early church fathers said eventually the Antichrist would rule from Jerusalem and it would be the capital of the world. Are we seeing a trend now moving in that direction, or maybe that's still a little too far off in your opinion?
Well, let's give Trump credit where credit is due. He declared yesterday, I believe, that January 22nd is from now on going to be known as Respect Life Day. So he's talking about continuing to oppose abortion, at least in his public statements. So that's good. But I think that we have to sort of draw back from that a little bit and see how that fits in with the context of his entire presidency. He obviously feels that the pro-lifers are part of the constituency or the coalition that got him elected. There are other groups as well. He, if you remember, campaigned under the slogan called America First, which went back to the 1930s when people like Father Coughlin, Charles Lindbergh, and Henry Ford tried to keep America out of the war. It had a certain meaning then. He tried to give it a new meaning, and I think what happened is that something got lost in the translation from the 1930s till now, because what we see now is in Trump's desire to honor the people who voted for him, he's creating these various constituencies and has no sense of how they contradict each other. So in this, he's emerging as a kind of neoconservative, a new form of neoconservatism. So he's pro-life, but he's also pro-Israel. And he's probably the most extremely pro-Israel president in the history of the United States since the creation of the State of Israel. Now, what do all these things have in common? I think what they have in common is the fact that the deep state is out to destroy Donald Trump. And Donald Trump needs allies in his fight against the deep state. The deep state has always opposed him from the beginning. They were campaigning for Hillary Clinton for the entire campaign. And so he looks around him and he thinks, who's going to save my presidency? Well, the right-to-lifers are not going to do it because they don't have enough political power. But the other group, maybe it's the Jews. Maybe the Jews are going to save my presidency. And it seems that that's the tack that he has taken in foreign policy, at least in the Middle East. He has gone on to become the most extreme proponent of Jewish interests of any president in the United States. And the best example of this is the recent decision to move the embassy to Jerusalem, thereby recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of the State of Israel. What the other thing that you notice with Donald Trump is that he acts without any sense that his actions are going to have consequences. This is the best example I can think of in recent developments. He impulsively, he knows he needs the support of the Likud and the Jews, so he recognizes Israel and sets off a huge reaction throughout the world. That reaction was best typified by the United Nations vote, where virtually every country in the world condemned the United States for its actions. There were 9 states that supported the United States. One of them was the United States itself. The other one was Israel. And then after that, we drop off to countries like Nauru, which you probably couldn't locate on a map. Nauru is a glob of, Trump got famous for about 15 minutes for referring to shithole nations.
Right.
Nauru is literally a shithole nation. It was a glob of bird shit in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The birds would have to land there because it was the only island for 1,000 miles around, and they would leave traces, excrement there, which came to be known as guano, and it was farmed. It was basically dug up. The guano was dug up, and it left holes behind. So it's a shithole nation. So the shithole nations of the world have united behind Donald Trump. There are only 7 of them out there. The consequences are horrendous for world politics in this regard, because you're supporting the most destabilizing nation in the world. You're supporting Israel in the Middle East. This means because he has done that now, he has to become an enemy of Iran. Because he has become an enemy of Iran, he has to oppose the nuclear deal, which the Obama administration spent years putting in place. Only problem here is that it wasn't a bilateral agreement. It was a multilateral agreement. So as a result, when Trump says he's going to revoke or he's not going to certify this agreement, he's speaking for other people for whom he has no right to speak. The other 4 people, the other 4 signatories to this agreement, one of which was Germany. So after Trump announces that he's going to decertify the deal, the German foreign minister stands up and announces, if you do this, it will be the end of the world. At this point, Trump apparently took notice. Some grown-up in the room probably drew his attention to this fact, that what he really meant was the end of NATO. If you go down this road, you will destroy NATO. You will therefore destroy one of the main pillars of American hegemony throughout the world. So we see this repeated over and over and over again. There is a vacuum of leadership here. So as a result, people like Secretary of State Tillerson gets to make policy that turns out to be at odds with itself, with any type of rational policy. So just last week, Secretary of State Tillerson announced that the United States will be staying in Syria. Well, first of all, this is illegal. The United States has no right to be in Syria. They were not invited by the government. It's basically a foreign invasion. Okay, the small number of troops that America has can't do anything, so they have to support an indigenous group, and they've chosen to support the Kurds, the PKK. Well, in doing this, again, these people act with no sense of consequence here. As soon as he did this, he enraged the president of Turkey, who immediately announced that they were going to invade Syria. Well, that's exactly what they did. The Turks invaded Syria. Now, at this point, what's your next move, Mr. Tillerson? You're playing chess and the rest of the world, you're playing checkers and the rest of the world is playing chess. So now Turkey has invaded Syria. Do you now attack the Turkish troops as they cross the border? Well, if you do that, you're attacking a fellow member of NATO. Yeah. That doesn't seem like a good idea. So what do you do then? Well, then do you side with Assad? Well, that's the arch enemy that you just announced, and the main reason you're staying in Syria. So a strategist like Liddell Hart would always say, The secret of strategy is to put your opponent on the horns of a dilemma. Well, the Trump Tillerson crowd has succeeded in putting itself on the horns of its own dilemma. This is really stupid, but it's partially driven by this ad hoc, flying by the seat of your pants Twitter type of presidency.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so concerning to some traditionalists out there. Is it really America first or is it Israel first? And I think those of you who kind of study the Zionist movement realize that America is essentially the right arm of Israel trying to expand this greater Israel. Just a quick update on the embassy. I think it was yesterday they reported that the U.S. Embassy formally won't move till 2019. I'm not sure if there was any update from that over the last 2 days. But this leads me into the next question. What is the next step? We see what has transpired as a backlash as a result of what Trump has said recently. And we're seeing, obviously, the Zionist countries kind of getting together and forming on one side of the fence. Then we see the Islamic countries forming. I mean, it seems like we're on that path towards World War III. But are we going to be dealing with perhaps a major false flag domestically? Will it happen in Jerusalem? And then maybe just another thought to throw out there, and just to pick your brain again, Dr. Jones, is it possible that Trump is just a fall guy for the New World Order with this apparent revolution coming, with this economic collapse coming? Will the Clintons come up behind in 2020 and say, listen, you guys couldn't get the job done. This is the direction we need to take. Or God forbid, have you seen Oprah potentially getting in there in 2020? I mean, goodness, who's she going to run with? Bill Nye, the science guy? I mean, this is just getting preposterous.
How about Harvey Weinstein
Yeah, right.
as our vice president? Actually, no, Oprah is not going to run. If she does run, she will not succeed because of one reason, and that is that picture of her nibbling on the ear of Harvey Weinstein. She is unelectable as a result of that. But taking a step back from that, Hillary Clinton is unelectable, and the reason this is the case is because identity politics is over. The Trump reaction was the reaction against identity politics. And even Bill Clinton warned Hillary that identity politics cannot succeed. You cannot win a national election with identity politics. And Trump was smart enough to ride that wave, and that's how he's in the White House. I've said before, I woke up thinking one day, people have called me many names in my career, but the one thing they never called me was un-American. Why is that? Well, it's because there's no America anymore. The fact that the insults now are you're homophobic, or you're an anti-Semite, or you're a racist, or you're a misogynist. In other words, you can always be attacked if you oppose any of these identity groups, but there's no basic overall structure anymore that can integrate these identity groups. It's gone. It's gone. I mean, I think it's the logical outcome of empire, and the fact that there's always people clawing to get to the top. And how do you get to the top? How do you control the thing? But it's gone. And I think that Trump's election was a sign that there is still some type of residual sense of an America, which though the opponents tried to define as white people. But I still think it's a residual, the last gasp attempt of some type of America out there. I mean, it was part of his slogan. So I think the big picture here is that I don't think he's in control. First of all, I don't think that he's a fall guy. I don't think he's anybody's man. He's his own man. It's obvious he's his own man, but that's his problem. His problem is that he is basically a narcissist from New York City, which perceives itself as the center of the world. He has all the prejudices of a New Yorker, the most grievous, of course, being his Zionism. And he does not know what he's doing, and he cannot think in terms of long-lasting consequences or the immediate consequences of his actions either. So he's constantly making a big threat, and then he has to back down because at this point, someone from the State Department or somebody calls up and says, "No, if you do that, then this will happen, and we can't do that." And so he backs down, which is what he did on the Iran deal, and well, that's the main thing so far. So the point I'm trying to make here is that This is, I see, I've said this before, this is God. God's hand is in this because it's the empire. The empire, every empire has the same trajectory. It will always lead to collapse. There's not an empire. This is in the book of Daniel, if you want to get theological about it, where they stated one empire after another will collapse. And the American empire is no exception to this rule. They could have stayed out of it by remaining a republic, but it's too late now. So what is happening here is God is making use of Donald Trump to bring about the end of the American empire. That's what I see.
Yeah, and there's no question about it. The New World Order is, on record as saying they want China as their model for this New World Order, and I think it is becoming quite clear that there is and has been a communist siege of this country. And this kind of ties in with my next question, Dr. Jones. I wanted you to talk a little bit about more of these alt-right groups and this movement. Are they all a part of this party, if you will, or this WWE show that I kind of state? I know you kind of liken it to a guinea pigs and a social experiment, which is a great way of saying it as well. It seems like we're being led into a giant race war. The New World Order wants chaos on every level in order to kind of usher in their new false messiah. But maybe you could talk a little bit more about these alt-right groups, maybe some of the communist connections that we're seeing at its origins with, minority groups and social justice movement. I mean, we could talk about this probably for about an hour, but we have to be a little bit more abbreviated.
Okay, the alt-right is the flip side of Black Lives Matter. So the first movement, in other words, and both of these taken together are an attempt to start the race war in the United States. I think that the race war narrative is something that the oligarchs want to pursue because it's the opposite of the Trump narrative. I'm talking about the narrative that got him elected, which was basically the people versus the oligarchs. They don't like that narrative at all because it names who the real enemy is. So what happened over this period of time is that George Soros spent millions of dollars to create an organization called Black Lives Matter, which had basically no following that I can see, no type of grassroots following. They tried to latch on to the rhetoric of the civil rights movement and resurrect something along those lines, a more violent version of that. But it didn't catch on. I'm telling you, it didn't catch on among the black population, much less the general population. So, but it did create its opposite, which is the alt-right, okay, which is the other side of the racial narrative. So I think that we don't have any more proof of this, but I think that the people like the Soros people are behind the alt-right to a large extent because you need two people to tango here. So in order to have racial conflict, you have to have a black group and you have to have a white group. And so what we saw in Charlottesville this past fall was the city, in a sense, luring these white guys into Charlottesville and then deliberately creating a violent confrontation. The police have now gone on record as saying basically they were told not to stand where they should have between the Antifa people and the white guys, but they actually pushed the white guys into the Antifa people so that there would be some type of violent reaction. What happened immediately after that was an attack by groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center against anybody on the internet that they didn't like. Now, they say they're against anti-Semitism, or they say they're against racism, but really it's a Jewish operation, and it's anybody that Jews don't like, they go after them, which is what happened. I got an email saying, sign this, fill out this form, we're going to do an article on you, you have 30 minutes. So I look at it, and then the first question is, why are you a white racist group? And I write back saying, I'm not a white racist group. You're the people who fantasized this. Why did you say this? Send it back to them within time. The next day, the article came out, and I'm not included in the article for some reason or other. The next thing that happens is the people who were included in the article had their were restricted on YouTube or had their PayPal accounts revoked or something like that. So this is, you see how they used this as a way of attacking people they don't like who are not necessarily part of the alt-right. So the alt-right gives them some type of justification to act against people like me who have a completely different type of agenda, although they don't like me either.
Now, I wanted to get your take on this. I don't believe I've seen you in any videos speak about this, and correct me if I'm wrong. I wanted to get your take on the whole crypto madness that's going on, because there are many, people are divided on this issue. Some seem to think that it's a good idea going into a digital economy. Some don't. They believe that the oligarchs are behind it, or at least, in the very least, will be eventually behind this kind of takeover of the blockchain. It seems like in the last 6 months it's really picking up steam, which kind of throws up a red flag for me. I wanted to get your take on it, if you have any opinion at all, and maybe where they're trying to take it. Basically, is the deep state trying to sucker people into a digital economy? There are many Christians who are concerned ultimately about a mark of the beast, type of technology coming into play. Wanted to pick your brain and see what you thought in this area.
All right. Cryptocurrency is a contradiction in terms. Currency means this can be used for all debts, public and private. Okay, this piece of paper, whatever it is, this can be used. Well, cryptocurrency if it's not public, in other words, if it's not a coin in some sense, which means a coin is a piece of metal that has the emperor or the king or the sovereign stamped on it, the image of the sovereign, which means that the state backs up this currency. Well, obviously, cryptocurrencies are not backed by the state. So therefore, they are not currencies. So what is it? What is Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin is it's like a tulip bulb, actually. It's like gold. It's obvious. It's something that has value because people buy it. And the more people that buy it, the more its value increases. And if people really get behind it, what you're seeing is, I think what we saw in past couple of weeks is a bubble. I think we had the Bitcoin bubble, and what you see now, or what you saw a few weeks ago, there was an article about the Winklevoss twins becoming Bitcoin billionaires. What they're saying, this is known as the suckers market. When you see articles like this, usually they're on the cover of Newsweek, like these 10 people became millionaires by selling real estate. What they're really saying is the big players want to get out of the real estate market. And at this point, the big players want to get out of the Bitcoin market, but they can't get out unless somebody buys their Bitcoins. So here's a way for you to buy their Bitcoins so they don't have to dump $1 billion worth of merchandise on the market and crash the price. So I think Bitcoin it's like gold. It's not a currency. It's not money. It cannot be used as money, but it can be a store of value as long as people keep bidding up the price. As soon as that stops, you're left with nothing. You're left with a tulip bulb. That was the first bubble, the tulip mania in Holland.
If you can, talk a little bit more about feminism and its role in what we're currently seeing in the degradation of, well, not just Western society, but society as a whole. We recently have this Me Too movement. I know Suzanne Venker did a wonderful article just recently, basically saying that it's an outcry against men in power, and truly has nothing to do with a voice for these victims of quote unquote sexual harassment. That really, it's just about putting feminists in power, and apparently the ringleader, is Oprah. And then we recently had, I think it was over Christmas, we had the feminine topless activists running around half naked trying to destroy the nativity scene in the Vatican, screaming "Woman is God" and all this nonsense. Where are they trying to take this?
Well, first of all, feminism is a form of social engineering. That's what it was. That's what places like St. Mary's College out here. Basically, it was a Catholic college for women run by nuns. The nuns went bust after Vatican II, and so they needed a new raison d'etre, and so that became feminism. And so they get paid, just as a Catholic university like Notre Dame gets paid for the social engineering of Catholics in general. St. Mary's will get paid for the social engineering of Catholic females. That's what it is. It's a form of control. Feminism is a form of control. And the best forms of control are always portrayed as liberation. And so what are you liberating? Well, you're liberating your appetite. You tell these ladies you can do whatever you want. You will be free if you do whatever you want, and they become enslaved to their appetites. First, it was the sexual appetite, but now with people like Roxane Gay, it's just the old other appetite, eating a lot of food. So basically, the message of feminism now has always been say yes to appetite, and now it's say yes to eating as much as you want, and you end up with a spokesman for this, like Roxane Gay, who weighed in at her top weight at 577 pounds. Okay, so that's what it is in general. Now, people who say yes to their appetite uh, end up with problems because they tend to violate the moral law in doing this, either by gluttony or by lust. Let's focus on lust now, and the ladies in Hollywood. The ladies in Hollywood line up at the door. We found this from Harvey Weinstein, the story. They line up at the door so that they can take their clothes off and get the big part in the movie. The best example of this was Kate Winslet recently, who she got an Oscar by doing a Holocaust porn movie called The Reader. And then she realized Harvey was going down, so she came out and denounced Harvey after praising him, standing next to him with the Oscar. What's going on here? These Hollywood actresses act on this principle, say yes to appetite, the sexual appetite. As a result, they get burdened with guilt. They feel shame, which is what happens when human beings take off their clothes in front of people. Ever since the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve felt shame because they were naked. So you feel shame. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with the psychological pressure? You can deal with it by confessing your sins, but if you're not a Catholic and don't have the advantage of going to confession, you take the other route, which is to become shameless. So the best example of this is the homosexual gay pride parade, where you march around in your jockstrap. And God didn't strike me dead, so I guess I'm okay. And so what do the women do? They do sex tapes, which is their way of being shameless. And the sex tape gets leaked onto the internet. Gosh, it got leaked again. How did this happen? Why don't people understand that when I film myself having sexual activity, this is a private, intimate activity? Well, then why did you film yourself doing it? And don't be surprised that it gets leaked. Anyway, so it gets leaked. And it turns out that every woman who accused Harvey Weinstein has a sex tape out there as well.
Yeah.
So we're talking about this kind of dynamic, what we had with Harvey Weinstein. He deserved everything he got. I'm sure 80 women accused him of something or other, but it's a moral panic because of the guilt, the inability of these people to deal with the guilt and shame that flows naturally from their sexual activity.
Now, do you think these indictments will actually turn into prosecutions, and what will be the consequences if there is no follow through in this area? Could we be speaking revolution? I mean, could we be seeing people lining up in Washington D.C., demanding that there's a go through with all of these indictments? Is it a giant distraction? Basically, is what I'm saying, or is this the real deal? I mean, are they really actively trying to go?
It is real in the sense that it has gotten beyond control of the people who tried to manage it in the first place. And I'm talking about people like Steven Spielberg, who excommunicated Harvey Weinstein from the Academy, from the synagogue of people who make movies, and that he was supposed to be the scapegoat. Well, it got beyond that. It got way beyond that because it became a moral panic and all these women came forward. So I think the net result is going to be that they are going to destroy, this is God's hand in this, these people have ended up destroying the most effective propaganda machine in human history. The moral panic destroyed it. And I'm talking about people like Matt Lauer and Charlie Rose, who were basically salesmen for the empire. They get paid a lot of money. They could tell people what is the purpose of these morning TV shows, Good Morning America, whatever they're called. It's to tell you how to think, because you abandoned the moral law, which is supposed to be your guideline in life. And now because you abandoned that, they have to tell you, well, what to eat for breakfast and what kind of clothes you should wear and who you should vote for and all this other type of stuff. That's what it's there for. Well, they blew it. I mean, Matt Lauer was apparently very effective in telling people what to do. And they paid him $25 million a year because he was so effective. Well, they lost this guy. And now it's all women. Now the men are missing, and once the men are completely gone from this equation, it will lose credibility because there are no fathers there anymore. The ultimate father figure was Walter Cronkite. That's what it was when it really worked on all cylinders. And when Walter Cronkite showed up and said it was a lone deranged gunman who killed John F. Kennedy, you believed him.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
those days are gone.
that's an interesting point that you raise, and you've talked about this before. How people are running to the TVs instead of prayer. So maybe specifically, we can piggyback off of that and talk about the role of social media in this giant social experiment. I believe there have been recent studies to suggest that people who are essentially addicted to Facebook and Twitter are more depressed, if you will. But that's another form of control. I just kind of find it on any one of these topics, whether you're talking about Trump, whether you're pro or against him, or even Francis within the church. There's kind of like an overreactionary emotionalism to where if you disagree with someone, it's like I'm never going to be your friend again. I mean, you can't even just politely disagree on certain topics, and
Yeah,
social media is kind of a platform for that, don't you think?
absolutely. I mean, I was asked by the black ministers here in town to hold a press conference when our mayor announced that he was a homosexual after hiding that fact after he got elected. And then I was denounced. I'm standing there in front of all these black ministers, and the chairman of the Democratic Party denounced me as a racist. I can't figure that one out. But anyway, I came home, and lo and behold, I was being unfriended on Facebook.
Uh-oh.
I, I can't tell you how that hurt my feelings. Don't, don't these people care about my feelings? I mean, little girls who grew up and used to play with my daughters and denouncing me. I mean, I didn't even know they knew who I was, and here I am being denounced. So obviously, I'm joking here. You know, I didn't really lose a lot of sleep because I've been unfriended on Facebook, but that doesn't say other people don't. And the fact that you're being friended or unfriended because of your views means that this is a form of control. If you put a gay flag on your Facebook page, that certifies that you are a good person, and you will get 500 likes. Probably some Israeli someplace clicking the button 500 times, you know? So because you're doing what you're told. And that is the whole point of Facebook. Do what you're told. And we will reinforce this by liking you.
Absolutely. Now, my last question to you, Mr. Jones, and I appreciate you coming on to the show, is what will be the newest or latest quote-unquote prank that the deep state will play on us in 2018? What's on your radar, something that you're seeing that maybe the majority are not seeing that's coming down the pipeline that we need to be aware of and kind of toot the horn before it actually happens?
Eric, I wish I had a crystal ball. I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I had one. The whole point, I would just say that the whole point of the future is that it is, if there's one thing that's in God's hands, it is the future, because it is always coming up with something that nobody expected. So you can kind of say, okay, if you continue to shoot up heroin, you will probably die of an overdose. That's not really predicting the future. That's just predicting the consequence of your actions that you're currently on. So I'm really talking about the present. I'm saying you're shooting up heroin, you'll probably die of an overdose. That will be in the future, but it's really implicit in the actions that you're having right now. The future, if we're talking about really the future, that's God's mind. And I don't have access to God's mind.
Well
Only
said.
God, even Jesus Christ said at one point, he didn't have access to it. The end, when the end comes, he said, only God the Father knows that. So that shows you how really rarefied the future is.
Yeah, and so it'll be interesting to see, what the next play will be, and obviously they have their whole problem, reaction, solution formula, if you will. So, I just encourage everyone to not be over reactionary to the things that they're seeing. I know they're cooking up a lot of things as in regards to the possible alien disclosure coming, and it seems like Trump may be the one to do that, and that's a whole other rabbit hole we don't have time to really climb down. But I appreciate you coming on, Dr. Jones. Again, you can get to his website, folks, at culturewars.com. He's got the new January issue out, and we'll try to bring him back on every few months to get us updated on all of his latest analysis. He's got a new piece here on Scorsese. We didn't have time today. I kind of wanted to pick his brain a little bit more on what we were seeing in the church, and maybe we can even do that next month Mr. Jones, we could come back on, maybe talk Francis and some of the things that we're seeing going on inside the church. But I do appreciate you coming on. Any final words before I close this out in a minute or two?
Yeah, it's in God's hands.
Absolutely. And like I said, at this website, we fly by the motto, faith over fear. And we know we see the convergence, on every level, socially, economically, politically. We see kind of all of these events coming together, and it shouldn't cause us to fall into despair, worry, and doubt. We've got to spread our wings as an eagle in faith and hope and transcend these times if we will. We know through the message of Fatima that in the end her immaculate heart will triumph, and that's what Dr. Jones is saying in a nutshell. My good friends, I appreciate you tuning into this latest broadcast of TradCatKnight Radio. Who will tomorrow's special guest be? We'll tune in tomorrow and find out. And lastly, again, please click that PayPal button and get behind this apostolate financially. I appreciate all your prayers and support. And until next time, my good friends, stay safe and God bless.